Welcome to the Wild Type Podcast. I'm Neptune and Chameleon.
I'm Lyssa's Lizards.
And we're your reptile girlies. Welcome back to the podcast.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. What if one day we just decide no longer Tuesday? We're moving to Wednesday.
Honestly, that would be such a weird adjustment for like our life schedules.
Yeah, no. We're sticking with Tuesdays.
Yeah,
we're locked in.
I'm very comfortable with Tuesdays. That would throw my whole schedule for a loop.
Yeah, no.
I would not like that.
We won't do that to you guys. Don't worry.
I don't do well with change. So
you're stuck with us on Tuesdays.
Yes.
So I have a little bit of story time. We have a jam-packed episode for you guys, but I wanted to get your real-time reaction.
Yeah, she hasn't told me this. She texted me and told me that she had some story.
Just a little story time.
I'm scared.
But I was flabbergasted when it happened, and I want you to react however you're going to react when I tell you what happened. And then everyone on the podcast can enjoy it.
I'm concerned. I'm worried.
I wouldn't be concerned. Just buckle up, because this is... Okay, so this is a...
I'm buckled.
Safety first. So this is a Walmart story time.
Okay. Oh, that could go one of
many
ways.
Just to set the scene for what we're working with here. So I went into Walmart. Now, I felt like I was looking like a hobo. I was rocking like leggings, shoes, like a big old hoodie.
I hope I don't see anybody that I
Sloppy
know outfit.
ponytail where I had worked out and then took a nap. So it was like extra crazy looking.
I get it.
You know, and I literally was like walking into Walmart. I was like, man, I'm looking rough right now. Right? Like I literally had that like
did you run into
an
ex or something?
No. Okay. Just your seatbelt's tightened, right? So just hang in there. So I'm like going through the aisles, whatever. Then this guy comes up to me and I was like, oh, okay, whatever. I was actually like taking a Snapchat of like an Oreo cake that I thought was cool. But besides the point.
Of course. Distracted by sweets.
Besides the point. He comes up to me and was like, hey. I was like, hi. And I was like trying to figure out if I know this guy. And he goes, where did you get that? And I was like, what, my hoodie? He goes, no, that beautiful smile. That's literally word for word what he said.
It's so cheesy.
Literally what he said.
Cheesy.
No, that beautiful smile.
I'm not going to lie. I would immediately start laughing at the poor man.
I started like blushing and like laughing and like embarrassed but flattered.
Yeah,
like,
it's like, how do you handle that?
And I was like, oh, thank you. No,
thanks.
And he's like, I just want to say, I think you're really beautiful. Now keep in mind,
you feel like you're dressed like a hobo.
And I was like, really? No, I didn't say that, but that's what I'm like.
Yeah. You're like, I am not dressed well right now. No.
And he's like, yeah, I think you're really beautiful. And I was like, oh, well, like, thank you.
Thanks.
And he's like, can I get your number?
Oh, that's so uncomfortable
and
sometimes.
I was like, oh, no, like, I'm not looking to date right now.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, like, what about his friends? And I was like, no, like, I'm okay. Thank you. You know, and he was so sweet about it. You know, he was like, okay, well, like, have a great day. And I was like, okay, thanks.
And you're just like scared pushing your car.
And I just went back, and he didn't have a basket or a cart or anything. So I'm
that
like,
feels weird.
I'm like, where'd you come from? Like,
yeah,
I don't.
That feels like, are you even shopping? Kind of a vibe.
I don't know.
Yeah,
let's just say my head was on a swivel the whole rest of the time I was in.
Oh, I've been followed.
In Walmart.
I've been followed by creepy men in Target way too many times to not be paying attention. It's always Target. Actually, funny. I have a slightly similar story time, very brief.
Okay, go for it.
Your
Target story?
You'll be very proud of me. I finally got my driver's license renewed this week.
And why is that such a big deal?
Because I've been driving around with an expired license for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
My husband finally got on to me enough and I did it. But
whenever we go anywhere, I'm like, I'm driving. It's not even an option.
In my defense, it's because you can't book an appointment at the DMV for like, it's like you have to book an appointment like 4 or 5 months out. It's insane.
I'm glad we've conquered this hurdle and you are now a licensed driver again.
Anywho, while I was walking up to the counter, they had like just called my number for my appointment to like go up and renew it and talk to the lady who's going to type in all my stuff. Yeah. And I'm walking by and this old man out of the corner of my eye just starts yelling in the middle of the DMV how pretty I am at me.
Oh.
And like, thank you. but no thank you. Not okay.
Like this, there's other people here.
Well, and then I ignored it because I immediately was uncomfortable. And so I just like kept, this was also like a much older man. This was like a man like in his 60s. Like, sir, this is not age appropriate. You should not be like yelling at me. And literally to the point where like people were turning around and I was just walking. I was like, I'm terrified. And then he starts saying stuff of like, oh, I guess you're too pretty for a thank you. And I was like, I didn't say that. I was like, I didn't.
Like, I want nothing to do with this.
I didn't. Yeah, this was not like, it was awful. But
so here you go. How not to hit on someone.
Literally.
And while I say like, obviously did not give the guy my number, I don't think his approach was bad though. He was very polite. It was a very cheesy pickup line, but it totally and
it made me laugh.
Yeah. It was very complimentary. He wasn't like creepy about it. So I'm like,
and I think that's different. It's age appropriate. He was shooting his shot. I feel like those situations are a little more okay. But if he had been like creepy in any way or been like way older.
And he was so respectful. I mean, he did was a little, I don't know, not like persistent. Thank you. Of well, maybe just as friends, which is fine to ask. And I was like, no, thank you, or whatever. And then he was like, okay, have a good day.
It's fine to ask, but also if you get a no, maybe just accept defeat, No,
and he was he was really nice about it and whatever. But I was like, really?
My situation was the definition of unwanted male attention.
I'm looking rough right now. Anyway, so it has nothing to do with reptiles. But if you're a girl, or a guy, whatever, it happens, right? People come up to you and they shoot their shot and
it just it's just hilarious that it happened when you were not at your best.
Literally had the conscious thought of man, I'm looking rough right now.
I look rough. And then I get hit on. Of course.
But it's the saying, if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best.
Oh,
so I'm like, hey,
100%.
if it ended up working out with him and we lived happily ever after, I'm like, just wait till we go on our first date and I actually wash my hair.
And I actually look beautiful.
Yeah. It'd be great.
Yeah. No,
Anyways,
I agree.
that's why I wanted your real-time reaction because I was like, this is too good not to say it on the pod.
That was pretty fabulous. I love that. And just funny and a little ironic that we both had something weird like that happen the same week.
Life is a girl. It's just what happens. We accept it. We deal with it.
So true.
So we promise we are going to be talking about reptiles. This is a reptile podcast.
This is a reptile podcast.
I mean, it's kind of like a hybrid though, right? We do reptiles, we do girly stuff, so it fits in the
lifestyle, reptiles, girl stuff,
all the above.
It works.
So we are talking reptiles and specifically rehoming, where we've kind of alluded to this previously, but
we've also gotten a decent amount of questions about this in the comments too lately.
Yeah.
I would say just off the top of my head, there were at least 2 or 3 comments I've read of what do you guys think of rehoming? What's your stance?
Someone asked us, would we ever take someone's pet who's looking to rehome?
I think we also got a comment on YouTube recently too of have we ever rehomed pets? So
So we wanted to dive into it a little more detailed. And so overarching question that we're going to try and answer is it okay to rehome, and talk through some different scenarios because there's a huge stigma with rehoming pets in general, rehoming a dog, heaven forbid you consider doing that, rehoming reptiles. And we're coming from back in the day where we had Petubers that had 50, 60, 100 animals, and they were just revolving doors. So then there was just, I think that really hurt
it really, really hurt the reptile content creator hobby, in my opinion, just because it was very it got to the point. I mean, I remember there were times where fans or haters were keeping spreadsheets of how many reptiles somebody gave away.
I haven't seen this one in a video. What happened to it? Is it dead? Did you get rid of it?
Or which ones died and stuff like that. And it's okay, sometimes things happen, and sometimes there's.
So now it's this stigma thing, and if you rehome, you it's hush hush about it.
Yes.
You'll very rarely see someone openly advertising and people do, but hey, I'm looking to rehome this pet, whatever. So do you want to maybe, what's a scenario off the top of your head that you think is an appropriate reason to rehome?
If you can no longer properly care for that animal, there is stuff happens.
Very simply.
People lose jobs. People, their life changes. You move across the country and, suddenly you live in a different climate.
Yeah, moving was one that I want to touch on. Even simply them allowing reptiles and then not allowing reptiles. Some landlords are cool with it if it's a small complex or a house or something, and then others are very strict of or you moving back in with your parents or a family member, and they're very anti reptiles, and so then you're having to rehome that. Or military people. We've seen
that's a great point. Yeah. I didn't even think of that one.
Yeah, so they're getting relocated sometimes out of country, and they have these reptiles, and you can't always predict that.
That's a great, well, and certain, it can be species specific too. Like for example, Tarzan, I can't have Tarzan in every state. It depends. It fully depends. I mean, let's be honest, I would probably just sneak him in if we're being completely real.
You didn't hear that from us.
Allegedly.
Hypothetically, maybe, possibly might do that.
Maybe. But like realistically, like even it's actually by county. Like, so every county has different rules. That's why some certain like reptile stores can't, be located in certain counties and things like that.
Totally.
So, if I ever moved to a, county, I would have to like a different county or a different state. I would have to like very seriously consider that.
Right. So moving is a big one. You touched on finances, right? Losing jobs. Yeah. That is a huge,
it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah,
it's heartbreaking. But realistically, when you get a reptile, you should be thinking about, okay, what is my monthly budget for said reptile and what are the initial upfront costs? And those are like the two main things. And then also like, have you saved for like an emergency situation?
Yeah, vet care.
Because, prime example, if, you lose your job, you get laid off, something like that happens, in a best case scenario world, hopefully you'll have some savings to like get you by for at least, a few months or 6 months or whatever the case may be. But sometimes you don't have that.
No. And if your options are literally feeding yourself or your pet, like, that's a super hard.
Or in a lot of people's case, feeding your kids or your pets.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just like.
in priorities, right? And like, as much as we would love to make sure that our pets are number one and we're doing everything we can, like, we have to be realistic that life happens.
Yeah.
And there's only so much that someone can do. And I think it takes a lot of courage to recognize that.
A lot.
To be like, hey, maybe at one point I was in a place emotionally, mentally, financially, physically, whatever, to take care of this animal. You thought you were in this for the long haul. Something changed, sometimes in your control, sometimes out of your control, and be like, you know what? I don't know if I'm the best person to give this animal the quality of life.
Honestly, like that's the responsible, mature, adult decision to make in those scenarios. It's so hard. I mean, it's so hard. That's like not an easy decision.
I have such like it drives me nuts when people like bash people from rehoming, because I'm like, that takes so much courage to do that.
I know.
And they're doing what they think is best for the animal, and you don't know the person's entire circumstances. You don't know the animal's circumstances or history, or what about in instances where the animal is aggressive or very defensive.
So did you cue me up for that one?
No, but I realized I did unintentionally. But like, so just to set the scene, because I know exactly where we're going with this now.
She was here for this. So,
But like, so we talked about things that are kind of out of your control from a human standpoint, but there's also
your circumstances,
things from the animal's perspective that like maybe this animal is different than what you were expecting, or their behaviors or whatever is just outside your,
which I would consider
your
that
knowledge or skill set.
I would consider that just like not being the right fit. You might think that you were the right fit, or that the animal was the right fit, or that their care was the right fit, and that was something that you could handle and do, and then turns out you can't. So I mentioned earlier, somebody had asked, have you ever rehomed pets before? And that was something I wanted to talk about in this, because I have, and it's not something I've talked about at all.
Right?
Literally ever.
This is like from the archive vault.
Lyssa's Lizards exclusive over here.
Oh my gosh, wait, hold on. I feel like with all the podcasts right now, they're doing all these exclusive interviews on like the tea of like everyone's life. So now I feel like I'm the like the interviewer that got this like
exclusive tea.
Awesome guest, to come on the pod. No, this is good to talk about though.
I think it'll be a little cathartic for me, because I've just never talked about it. But this was back in the days when I was posting on Instagram, but I wasn't posting on TikTok or anywhere else.
TikTok did not exist.
This might have been in like 2018, 2019. It was a while back. Yeah. But I had begun to have interest. I think at this point I had 3 or 4 reptiles. I had Charlie, I had Barney, and I had Ducky and Monkey. So I had.
And Poke.
Oh, no.
Yeah, because you didn't get Poke with me. You already had Poke when we became friends.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And then you got Buffy, so you already had Poke.
My timelines are all mixed up. Okay. So, Either way, I think I only had like 4 or 5 reptiles.
Yeah.
And
Single digits for sure.
And I had very much, with the exception of Barney, my panther chameleon, had started out with like all like kind of the, basic quote unquote like newbie, reptiles and everything, geckos, all of that. And so I really wanted to take on like a different species. And I was looking into blue-tongued skinks. And I knew that there were differences in, a northern blue-tongued skink and a halmahera or a Indonesian blue-tongued skink. But honestly, I didn't know enough. I knew that there were, those differences, and I knew the differences in their care.
Yeah.
But I also, at this point, I don't think I was like super well educated either on what captive born means versus captive bred and born, and the differences in personality and behavior that can
temperament
bring. But temperament's the right word. And so I ended up getting this halmahera blue-tongued skink, and I named her Buffy. And to this day, that's like one of my favorite names because I'm a big Buffy the Vampire Slayer girl.
Yeah.
So she was pretty small when I got her, and she was very, very sassy, did not like being handled. And one of the reasons I had wanted a blue-tongued skink was because I had like read and seen how, comfortable they usually are with handling and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think one of the mistakes that I had made at that time was a lot of that information was actually about northern blue-tongued skinks.
Yeah, and for anyone who's not familiar with blue-tongued skinks, she's talking about they're coming from 2 completely different regions.
Yes. So Indonesian and halmaheras are much more like tropical species. I don't know if tropical is the right word, but they just have a lot higher humidity. They come from an area with a lot higher humidity. And then northern blue-tongued skinks are from Australia, and they're completely arid, very, very different. And they also look very different.
Like similar species, they're just from completely different regions.
They're all blue-tongued skinks, but they all have like different scientific names because they are technically different species of blue-tongued skink, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So anyway, so when I like did all my research, I had like, read all about, how tame they were and how great of pets they were and, things like that. And that was just not my experience with Buffy.
Yeah.
As she got older, I think I had her for less than a year, but within that year, and I was doing the same thing that I did with Tarzan, I was handling her all the time, every day, not all the time, but like every day for a good like 30 minutes to an hour, like really making an effort to bond with her.
Yep.
And it just wasn't happening. And she honestly just got more and more aggressive, was like biting me every time I took her out, like to the extreme. And it just got to the point where like I wasn't even really like comfortable handling her because she just never calmed down. And so it was a mix of like she was very, very aggressive, but also I was frustrated because this was just like not
what you signed up for.
It's not what I signed up for with that species, and it wasn't what I had anticipated or expected. So because of that, I was just like, you know what? I don't think I can keep doing this with her. And I think something that's important for me to note is in where I am in my reptile journey now, like 6 years later, I don't think I would have rehomed her if it had happened now.
Right.
But back then, this was the first aggressive reptile that I had ever worked with.
And I want to just put a little caveat. When you're saying aggressive, it's not because she's like an angry animal. She's a defensive animal, right? And so this is from...
I definitely said all of that wrong. Very highly, highly defensive,
right,
not aggressive.
Which comes across as
aggressive,
or they're hating you, or they're mean to you. Because we see this all the time with chameleons too. And I'm like, they don't hate you. They're not being mean.
Yeah.
They're scared.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And it's a defensive behavior.
Yes.
So I just want to like everything you said.
I actually feel really dumb for saying that because I preach that all the time, that they're not aggressive, they're defensive. So that was just a lapse of wording there.
But you're speaking as if you were back in that moment though, when you were at that point of your keeping where you're like, this is an aggressive animal.
It felt that way. And I mean, and even Barney, when I got him, he was highly defensive for like a good 7 to 8 months. And I had to like really work with him too, but he never actually bit me. And it was at the point where I was like almost scared of her. And as she was getting bigger, it made me more and more nervous.
Right. So then it comes to the point where like, are you comfortable handling her if you need to do a health check, taking her to the vet, moving her to a new enclosure? Those are things that are essential. Yeah. While most instances, we don't recommend handling your reptile on a regular basis. But for those particular scenarios, you are required to at least somehow get them out of their enclosure, even if you're not directly handling them. And if you can't do that, then that's putting their health at risk potentially.
It just wasn't great. And like I said, if I were in that exact situation now, I don't think that I would have rehomed her, just because like now I know exactly what it's like to deal with an animal that's just a little more defensive.
Right.
And like now I'm not afraid to take a bite, you know, things like that. But at that time it felt...
It's scary.
It felt not good. I just was really struggling, and I wasn't bonding with her, and it was just awful. And so I made the really, really hard decision to rehome her. And I, found a great family who had lots of experience with blue-tongued skinks. They had like 4 or 5, like over the course of years. And so they were looking for a new one to take in. And so I haven't heard any updates in several years or anything, but I do know that she went to a good home that had experience with blue-tongued skinks. And that was really important to me. But that was a really hard call to make. And it's not so much that I regret it. I think I made the right decision for me at that time.
Where you were in your reptile keeping,
Again, I don't think I would do it now, just because now I'm more comfortable with more defensive animals because I have more experience. And I also definitely don't regret it because later on after that fact, I did end up getting Nilla, my northern blue-tongued skink, and she is the angel of a blue-tongued skink. I mean, don't get me wrong, she hisses, but...
But that's what you thought you were signing up for. Yeah.
Yes.
That's really hard.
Yeah. It was not fun. It was definitely not fun. And you were with me in that process. We had a lot of conversations about it.
We were very new.
We were new friends.
New friends at that time.
I remember being a little worried you were going to like judge me for that decision
because there's such a stigma.
I know. I remember that.
Because there's such a stigma. And it just it really bothers me because it's a detriment to the animal.
I agree.
Right? Because if you didn't get the experience that you have as a keeper now and the courage to be like, hey, I'm going to do whatever is necessary for this animal.
Yes.
If you had gone into this like fear response for you, right, of being very scared to handle this animal, to whatever, like that could have put her at harm's way.
I just wasn't at a point in my reptile keeping journey where I was confident at all. And I was scared and intimidated and was just not ready to handle it, And so it just... and again, I think another thing that was important was that was something that I when I bought the animal, I had asked the vendor at the expo if, they were captive bred, and he said, "Oh, they're captive born." And I didn't know the difference at the time. So just a reminder. You just hear the word
captive and you're like,
I was like, oh, great. But then like once she started to exhibit all the behavior that she did, I started researching it. And that's actually how I learned this. And captive born essentially means that the mom was captured in the wild and was most likely pregnant when she came in. Yeah. And so that means that the genes of this animal, they're not as well adjusted to captivity or well adjusted to being handled.
Or temperament. Right. Like, yeah.
And exactly. And so once I started researching that, I was like, oh, this makes a lot more sense now. And so I
right. Which is not always directly correlated, but you can't ignore that that's a potential.
Totally.
Factor.
It's just something to note when you're looking at animals. It goes into the conversation of like wild caught, captive bred and born, captive, born. So it's just an important note, but yeah, that's my rehoming experience. That was a tough one. Need crickets delivered to your doorstep for all of your hungry reptile and amphibian friends? Josh's Frogs has got you covered. We've mentioned so many times on the pod how convenient, well-priced, and healthy it is to buy your bugs online.
Josh's Frogs now offers auto delivery for your commonly ordered items. You choose the products, frequency, and preferred delivery day. They take care of the rest.
They offer a range of feeder cricket sizes to fit your pet's needs, all the way from pinheads up to 1 inch.
Head on over to joshsfrogs.com and use coupon code THEWILDTYPE10 to save 10% on your next order of live crickets. April showers bring Pangea sales. They're coming out strong with a 20% off sale on egg organizers and hatch combo for any of our breeder listeners.
And if you're in the market for new branches, they'll be 15% off. This includes manzanita, grapevine, ghostwood, and junglewood.
Looking for a new mister? They'll be doing a 15% off sale for Pangea hand misters and Exoterra pump misters.
And last but not least, at the very end of April, you get a free sleeve of small bio cups with a purchase of $75 or more. Check out PangeaReptile.com.
If you're looking for a new enclosure for one of your critters, be sure to check out the ones from Zen Habitats. Every enclosure is customizable, allowing you to mimic nature and provide the various UVB and heat gradients required for your species, which means they'll work great for both tropical and arid environments.
One of our very favorite things is how easy Zen makes it to stack multiple enclosures with their stacking spacers, and their extension kits allow you to be even more efficient with your space. All of their enclosures, stands, and spacers come with a 5-year warranty and free shipping on all their orders. Check out zenhabitats.com for your next enclosure.
I have kind of I didn't actually rehome the animal, but I did go through the entire thought process considering whether or not I wanted to rehome Pluto, my crested gecko. And this is because I had gotten Neptune, and then I had gotten Pluto, and then I was like, man, chameleons are my jam. And I like went really into chameleons, and I was like, I don't know if I'm like as into geckos as I am chameleons.
And that's completely fair. I mean, sometimes that happens too.
So I did this, like I talked to you, I talked to my mom. I remember driving home from somewhere, and I was like thinking about it, like genuinely thinking about like what would my life look like if I rehome Pluto, and I started crying. Like literally while I was driving, because I was so sad. But I was like, but my heart lies in chameleons, and I will happily admit that my passion for chameleons is definitely more than crested geckos.
Absolutely.
Like there's no doubt.
There's a reason you send people to me when they ask about crested geckos.
I'm like, but like I still have Pluto, and I still have every intention, because I was like, I can provide him quality of care.
Absolutely.
I can provide vet care for him. I know I'm doing right by him. I just didn't really have any interest of like handling him at any more. Like
he was also, I think at that point was also when he was exhibiting more of his like male breeding behavior, where he was like
very bitey and like gaping and like
very, very defensive as well.
I have not handled Pluto outside of moving him between enclosures in years at this point.
I mean, sometimes, and honestly, and that's something else that I've learned since this whole situation in my reptile keeping journey, depending on the species and depending on, your expectations of things. Like there are animals that I've had, like literally Poke and who else? Voldemort do not love being handled. Ducky too. Yeah. Like I've had plenty of animals that like don't do well when handled often. And so I just let them live their lives.
And that's the kind of aha moment I had. I was like, his quality of life is not diminished because I'm not handling him. Me handling him does not add value
to his life.
In fact, one could argue maybe takes away, like maybe he's just happier, just doing his little gecko thing.
It's the same reason why with Hazel, who my Hog Island boa, she doesn't enjoy being handled either, but sometimes she will choose to come out of her enclosure and I'll handle her then.
Right.
So it's like I handle her when necessary and when she wants to be handled. And I allow her to make that choice by just opening up the door. And if she chooses to come out that day, then we'll hang out,
But I think it is and this might be a slightly controversial opinion, but I think no longer being interested in the animal is a very valid reason to consider rehoming them.
Definitely a smidge controversial.
It's definitely controversial. But my thought process behind this is that is your lack of interest then going to be exhibited by the care of the animal suffering because you're not going to be researching the species to keep up to date on the new trends? Are you going to be providing enrichment and quality of life? And maybe you are able to do all those things.
Right.
But odds are, if you're no longer interested in keeping the species, that stuff is going to start to slip.
Yeah, I mean, ideally not, obviously. It shouldn't, but...
And it should never be your intention of I'm going to get this until I lose interest. If that's your thought, then that is unacceptable. Don't even get the animal.
Unacceptable, yeah.
But if you go into it with the best of intentions, I'm like, wow, I think this is a super cool animal. Da, 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 da. My thing is is Pluto my favorite reptile? No. But am I confident that I'm able to provide the quality of life and I am still willing and wanting to do that for him? Absolutely. So that's why I feel like I will keep him as long as I can stay behind.
Yeah. On top of his care. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. So another one that I think is kind of interesting is if you think that you're potentially able to care for this animal properly, and then you come to find out that you can't, and it's not because of like circumstances or money or whatever. So I've actually seen several people that I know kind of in the reptile community end up rehoming animals due to climate or location. So for example, environmental stuff. People who live in like a super humid area like Florida, it's a little bit harder to keep lower humidity species. And people who live in Arizona have a little bit of a harder time keeping more tropical species because they cannot keep the humidity up no matter how hard they try. So like I've seen people get animals with the full intention, being so excited about the species, so excited about the care. They, do everything right. But then they end up rehoming because they could not meet up to the care.
In my opinion, is a very valid reason to not
environmentally
no longer
sometimes.
have that animal.
Yeah.
I've also seen, this one's so heartbreaking, animals that become handicapped or injured or sick more often than not because of improper care. And I have to be the one who's like, hey, they need a vet. Hey, they need this, they need this, they need this, da da da. And all they're seeing is cha-ching, 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 right?
Money signs.
All that is costing them money, which is fair.
Yeah.
Either they don't have the money or they don't want to spend the money on the animal. So then their next question is, okay, well, like, will you take them?
Can I rehome?
Them? Like, I want to get rid of it. Like, whatever. That person then should no longer have that animal if you're not able to provide the care. My 2 cents, you shouldn't have gotten that animal if you weren't going to do that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
To begin with, right? Like, shame on you.
Yeah.
But if that is like, what's done is done, right?
That's the situation where like, I'm a judge you, but you should rehome it.
Right. Because then you're looking out for the animal.
Exactly.
Right? It's no longer about that person. It's no longer about what decisions they made, their finances, their personal choices. Right. Now it's what's the well-being of that animal. And this person has made it very clear they're not willing or wanting to do what's necessary to get this animal to be okay.
In all honesty, it's frustrating because those are the cases that create the stigma.
Yep.
And so that's frustrating because that is like one of like the prime candidates for rehoming. You should rehome in those situations.
Right.
But those are the situations where I'm going to judge you.
But like, could that have been prevented if you had done this beforehand? Absolutely. Yep. That is a 100% preventable
situation.
Yeah. Either due to lack of resources, lack of knowledge, whatever, all of which in theory could have been caught prior to even
should have been caught
in the first place.
That's where, sorry, I'm getting judgy now. That's where I'm like, ugh.
No, but this is why rehoming is such a thing where like, I'm not going to make an assumption about someone because I don't know your situation.
Right.
I don't know what you've tried with the animal to try and get them to be less defensive. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And whatever blip on the internet that I see, like that, I'm do what you think is best for you and your animal.
Exactly. And that's, it's just such, there's so many situations, but I think the big answer to our question of like, is rehoming pets okay? I think the answer is yes. If, all of these reasons, like if it's all of these, one of these many reasons, I think these are the reasons where it should be done, and it's the responsible thing to do in certain situations, and it shouldn't be shamed and shouldn't be judged, even though I'm judging the people in that one scenario. But all the other situations should never be judged,
Yeah, and it's a very vulnerable thing, like we said at the beginning, like to have the courage to even ask someone to rehome your animal is like a very big deal. So go easy in the comments, guys. I know this is going to be...
Please, nobody attack me. I've kept the secret for like 5 years.
I didn't know it was a little juicy, but this is very vulnerable for us, right? Or even to admit that, like, hey, I've considered
and again, like,
rehoming.
It's hard because I look back at my specific situation, and part of me is like, I wish I wouldn't have done that, but I also think it was the right thing for me to do at that time. And it ended up, because of that situation, I don't know if I would have gotten Nilla, and I'm obsessed with her. So, it was the right situation at the time. And
that's all you can do. You can only go off of what is in front of you. Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
Like,
I think when it comes to rehoming pets, you just have to do what is best. And I think you said something that was interesting when you were thinking about it with Pluto. You started crying. When I was thinking about it, I felt relieved. And I think that's when and that's when it's okay, is when
it's like a bad breakup.
It is. It's that's literally what it is. You look at it and you're not at the animal, but like at the situation, and you're like, okay, like, is this not a good situation for either of us at this point? Literally a breakup. Are
you going to be miserable? Because like, and these animals have like long lifespans, long commitments. And like, are you only having the animal because you feel like you should have the animal? But like, it's tricky.
Well, and not to keep, harping on this part of this, topic, but like, it was something I had also considered when I was considering even getting Tarzan, because that was something where I was like, okay, if this animal is going to be a 7 to 10 foot snake in my home potentially one day, and if I can't get him to tame down, I cannot keep him. That was like actually like
we had this conversation before you even picked up Tarzan.
I think we had agreed that like I would give it a year. And if I saw like improvements in him and like taming him down and everything, then, you know, then I would keep him. But if I saw no improvements and if he was getting worse and worse and was simply not an animal that I was going to be able to handle safely, then I was going to look at rehoming. And I'm lucky that he's a perfect little angel baby. But, you know.
Because then you want someone who has the confidence, because you have to be confident when you're dealing with a defensive animal. You have to understand their body language. You have to know how your body language is impacting their fear response, right? Yeah, because 100%. It is not aggression, it is not mean. No. This is, you know, we see it all the time with dogs, right? Like,
I'm still so mad I said the word aggressive so many times. I'm so annoyed about that.
You kept saying it, and I was like,
You're like cringing on the inside.
I'm like, I'm going to have to say something.
No, I'm really glad you did, because I would have sounded like a hypocrite, because that is something I preach many times.
I honestly think it's so insightful to probably where your mindset was.
100% is.
You were in the moment with Buffy. This is how you were feeling.
Yes.
And you weren't like educated, or I don't know, even educated.
I wasn't educated at that time.
Experienced enough in your reptile journey to be like, oh, I need to reframe this behavior and not take it so personal, right?
You're so insightful to like recognize that's where those words were coming from, because that is simply not a word that is in my vocabulary with reptiles to this day. But you were going back in time and
you're like, this was my thought process and this is what I was experiencing.
Crazy.
Which is why now you're like, I probably would have kept her, because I can interpret that behavior differently.
I'm not going to lie. I feel like we just had a therapy session.
See, I'm the podcast host and you're my like super cool guest that came on to spill the tea, and like, don't you feel better now?
That's what it feels like in this moment, truly. Ugh. Yeah. No, rehoming is a really tough topic. If, you know, you guys can always, you know, let us know your experiences. Let us know if you've had to rehome pets. What were your situation?
Have some compassion.
Have some compassion. And like, I hope we can remove the stigma. Like, not, obviously, we're not going to do that entirely. But
but just like recognize that all we can do is our best. All we can do is make decisions based off of the information we have available to us, which is always subject to change. We would like to hope everyone goes into owning an animal with the intention of having them
always
forever, but you have to do what's best for you and you have to do what's best for the animal.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the end of the day, and sometimes that means it's not forever.
Yeah. Oh, it's heartbreaking, but it's an important
the realities.
One. It is.
Okay. To round us out, we went girly, we went reptile, so we're going back to something girly. One of our favorite segments to do, which is, are you the type of girl to...
I love this one. Are you the type of girl to buy or DIY?
It's great because it rhymes.
I know. I loved it. I loved that one. So
yeah, this is good because I know we have slightly differing opinions. I feel like you're the DIY queen. So do you want to kind of give your
two
cents on it?
I would say I'm like a good 80-20 DIY and then 20 buy it. And it just depends on the situation. But I also will sometimes do both, where I will buy it and then DIY it and change it. Yeah. And like make it different.
Your vision for things is like one of my like most favorite thing to witness, especially as like her and Logan are like building out their home and everything. And when you had your studio all permanent, you're like, okay, so I got this gigantic mirror and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it. And I was like, what? Because in my brain, I'm like, that's not even an option. You don't cut mirrors. You just buy them how they come. And you're like, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to like cut into this, and then I'm going to do this and that. And I'm like in awe of like your brain just like,
I really appreciate that. These things. But all I can think about right now is that mirror that you're talking about sliced my husband's arm open and took us on an ER trip months later. So
yeah, before your guys' wedding too.
So you're just sitting here like complimenting me and like talking about my vision. I'm like, thank you.
Because you bought them off like Facebook Marketplace or whatever.
I got 8-foot mirrors for free on Facebook Marketplace.
Where you're like, I'm going to take this I'm going to make my bar cart into a disco ball.
Which I did.
And I was like, I was like, what? And then you're like, yeah, ta-da, it's done. I was like, this looks fabulous.
Thank you.
And you can buy them like that.
True.
But you're like, I'm going to do it myself.
So, but then I have a situation. So for example, I've been talking for months, and you've probably heard me say this. I've been saying for months that I am going to DIY our dining table. I'm going to like build our own dining table.
Yeah.
I am no longer planning on doing that because I'm at a point where I'm really sick of having a kitchen table with only 2 chairs, and I'm just going to buy one because I don't have the time to DIY right now.
I'm so glad you said this because literally what I had written down was it's time versus money.
Yes. 100% the convenience of it.
It is totally time versus money. Do you want to spend your time on it or do you want to spend your money on it? And in instances, and I also wrote this down, furniture, I will buy.
Yes.
You will not catch me DIYing furniture or any sort of like hardware or anything like that. Where I love to DIY is in arts and crafts.
Oh, you're a big arts and crafts gal. Yeah.
Because I'm fairly artistic, and I'm very good at replicating things, and I'm very good at like seeing that. I'm like, oh, I could do that.
See, my thought process always, oh, I could do that, but I could do it better.
Oh,
so that's always
put your own flair on it.
Yeah.
I will totally do artsy stuff. So like the geode art that you remember had like all the little geodes with the crystals and the sparkles.
Yes.
Those suckers are so expensive.
No, those are so pricey.
Like a couple $100, if not up to $1,000 for like the big ones.
And if they're using resin, it's like so expensive.
Resin, crystals,
it's,
a little Sharpie marker. I was watching YouTube videos and I was like, I can do this. And I can do it well. And I can make it my own colors. I can
totally.
do whatever.
You can make it your own completely. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's always really important is making it your own. Put your own spin on it. Like, that's my favorite.
I would put myself at 50-50. 50% DIY, 50% buy it. Because sometimes I'm like, could I DIY? I'm like, yeah. Is that how I want to spend my time?
Right.
Is that fun?
Right.
No. So
See,
I'll just buy it.
My answer is 9 times out of 10. Hell yes, I will have the most fun DIYing this and the most fun doing this. But then there are other times where I'm just like, I don't have the energy, and that's where I've settled with the table.
Yeah,
and I started thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna have to not only buy a jigsaw for the first time, which is like a big, tool,
that's a big girl purchase.
But like also is the first time I'm going to like build something with my jigsaw, going to be my literal dining room table for people to sit and eat. Probably not a good idea.
Also too, what I think about is the quality.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Like sometimes you're paying for someone who's experienced, who knows what they're doing, who has a machine that can just like do it. You know it's going to be quality. It's not, you're not going to be sitting at your table and all of a sudden it collapses. Not that yours would do that. But you know what I'm saying?
Easily
like,
could have. We don't know.
But like some DIY things, like it's not perfect, but like it works. And then other things I'm like, no, I want it to be perfect, solid.
I just love DIY. Like most of the time, I'm like 80-20, 90-10 DIY. But then there are just times where I'm like, okay, I really don't have the energy. And then that's when I'm like, okay, I'll buy it. But
that's what I'm saying. I love your brain because you're like, oh, I need this. And I'm like,
I mean, there's literally nothing I love more than like coming up with my own weird interior design stuff. So big fan of all that stuff. So I just, any chance I can to DIY, I'm usually going to take it.
Yeah. So let us know. Are you the type of girl or guy to do DIYs or to buy it?
Yeah.
Let us know.
I love some good creativity.
Yeah. And you could be a hybrid, right?
True.
You could buy it and then put your own little.
It's so funny too. My husband is such a buy it. He's like, why would we do that? I'm like, because it's cool, babe. Like,
and there's something to be said of saying that you did that.
I
like
take
when someone
so much pride.
Something that you did, and you're like, thanks, I did it myself. And then they're like, oh, what? You did that? And you're like, yeah. You're trying to act all like humble about it, but inside you're just beaming with pride because you're like, you know how many splinters I got trying to make that thing? And like,
there's literally nothing that makes me prouder than somebody complimenting my home and knowing that I like created half the things in there. Yeah. Like,
totally.
Just brings me so much joy.
Totally. And that's how I felt about like the geode thing too. Because I'm like, but like, I want to make it. So.
Well, and like, for example, when you like, because you painted some of the walls in your house and they turned out incredible.
People keep saying it's wallpaper.
Nope.
And I was like, nope.
Hand painted.
Took me like 4 days. But
that took a long, I helped with one of those rooms and that was a beating. It was not easy.
It was a long time. But I wanted it to look a certain way and I was happy to do it. And I had the skill set. I had the time. So, and I was a little short on money because I had just bought a house. So I was like, okay, we're just going to.
It looked so good though.
We're going to do it ourselves.
It looks incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. So now when people compliment it, I'm like, thanks.
Thanks. I did it myself.
Yep.
It's like that. What is it? That like Julia Fox sound of like, thanks. I did it myself. Have you heard that TikTok sound?
No.
Okay. Well,
I'm
embarrassing.
sure someone listening has, so They're nodding along, being like, yeah.
Please comment and let me know I'm not the only one that's heard that TikTok sound.
Yeah. Okay, well, let us know what type of girl you are, DIY or buy.
Yeah.
I think everyone's a little bit of both.
A little bit of both.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a pretty fun episode.
I know. I liked that one.
A little different. We had moments of vulnerability. We had moments of bad pickup lines. We had moments of DIY.
Lots of great little moments. I know. This one was very well rounded.
Yeah. So a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
But thank you guys for tuning in, listening, watching.
Thanks for always being here. Please don't forget you can leave us voice memos. We love them. We love them. So leave us voice memos. Leave us a comment.
Review. We're doing really well on our reviews.
Oh, really? I haven't checked them in a while.
We have over 70 Spotify reviews. 5 stars, baby.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Oh,
you guys are crushing it.
Oh, I feel so special.
Thank you so much for the support. Yeah.
Love it. So amazing. Well, we appreciate you guys so much. Always, always.
Yeah. And we'll catch you guys in the next episode. I'm Neptune the Chameleon.
I'm Lyssa Slizzards.
And we'll talk to you later.
Bye.